part of it is that when we are virtual, I can't do minutes at the same time. So we're live streaming right now on YouTube, and it's also recording to my computer. And that way I can go back and
You're a celebrity in Scarborough.
y'all are famous.
Yeah.
I'm not
on
a
TV all the time. You're like a serial.
The live stream on YouTube may change. I don't know. The council is talking about it, so they may only want certain, they said major committees.
Well, this would be included.
Are we a major?
I don't know
committee?
what the definition of a major committee is, so that is,
Well, then you have a good working definition of a minor committee.
I've got no definition.
Yeah.
Well, with that, do you want to go ahead and get started? So we'll call the meeting,
I can't wear my glasses and a mask at the same time.
it's tough. Jamie provided us minutes from the last meeting, and it was in your packet. Anybody want to propose a motion
there we
to
are.
accept those minutes? And we do have one, and we have a second with Anton, and Deb put the motion forth.
Can I just note that there will be a minor revision because I had Ron participating both in person and virtually, which
Oh, I
is a
didn't
real
pick that up.
feat.
Yeah,
So I will make that minor correction.
yeah, that's an edit.
Yeah.
Not of content.
Yeah.
No,
Well, any discussion from other members? All right, let's enter these in the record by vote. Do you have to do an official? roll call?
We're all in person, so I don't need to do a roll call. I don't
Okay,
think.
all in favor then?
we're an easy group.
And our agenda, although we're all leaving a little, well, most of us are leaving a little bit earlier, and sorry about that. But I think the first item is the large solar. Jamie, it takes about 30 seconds to get through that one.
It does, but there is a little nuance in there. So the ordinance was approved, which is fantastic. The council will likely be taking it back up at their meeting next week because there was an amendment that they did not take up that they were supposed to. So the amendment was dealing with setbacks on arrays on closed and capped landfills. We had a developer reach out, and the way our language was written, they wouldn't be able to construct their array with the 50-foot setback from the property line to the edge of the fence because of their DEP solid waste permit that says that they can't basically puncture the top of the capped landfill.
Oh, I got you, because it's on a solid waste.
Yeah.
Okay, and this
So-
is the one for Eagle Maine.
It's actually not EcoMaine because we didn't have our performance standards in place when they got their approval. They just had to go through.
Yeah, because they were municipal.
Yeah, so this is the Kimberly Clark
Oh,
landfill, which is right
okay.
next to EcoMaine.
Yeah,
So the amendment will read that the setback is a minimum of 65 feet from the property line to the edge of the array. And then they need to put a perimeter fence somewhere within that
within
setback
that setback.
at the greatest extent allowed through their DEP permit. So typically they need at least 15 feet between their fence. And the
the edge
solar
of the
array.
landfill.
So
Got it.
we backed the setback up by 15 feet, and then they have a little bit more flexibility for where they put their fencing in.
They're
That sounds reasonable, and I don't think it's gonna affect the other
Yeah, it should.
land that's been identified as potential.
Yeah.
Solar fields.
there didn't seem to be too much in the way of public comment on this, did there?
There wasn't, there
I
was
just
more.
I only saw one.
Yeah, the hearing that was held at the town council, there wasn't much at all. Really, they just wanted more flexibility on land zoned as light industrial. They didn't want the minimum lot size requirement. The council didn't move forward with that. It's still 25 acres or larger. And, but there was quite a bit more feedback at the public hearing that the planning board had, but nothing substantial change.
I think it was more because they wanted to learn more. Well, that's great. That's a big step. And certainly you put a lot of effort in that, and that took us a while to get through that. As we know, ordinances don't ever go very slow, or very fast.
Yeah, they don't go fast.
So we'll live with that, but
Yeah, I was riding in this morning listening to NPR, or MPBN, I think it was in Ellsworth where they're talking about pumping the brakes on new solar
I don't know that.
installation. Okay.
Well, I think Augusta is putting a pause, but there's going to be a statewide pause at the end of this year.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I mean, it's just to correct things and get things right, and it'll open back up. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah.
But I think it's right to slow down a little bit, and make sure we're doing our due diligence. The state, anyway. All right, with that, we can move to the site plan review ordinance that includes EV chargers. And Jamie did put a bunch of information in your packet regarding the ordinance language. Want to go over it?
sure. So this basically was laying out the committee's reasoning for moving forward and proposing these changes that would require, at a minimum, new development and redevelopment prepare for installation of EV chargers, referencing both Maine Won't Wait, the comp plan, and also the energy and sustainability plan. So just kind of, I provided some definitions in there. And you'll note I had level 1 in there and then realized that nowhere was it referenced.
That's good.
So I struck it out. We can decide if we want that in there or not. And then kind of giving the reasoning for the levels or requirements that are being proposed for residential development. Pretty high requirements, since that's where the majority of charging happens. And then there are some items from our last meeting. We hadn't really come to any kind of consensus on what we want kind of electric vehicle charging capacity to look like. Do we want conduit running through the entire parking lot or just a portion of the parking lot? So that's called out in there, highlighted in there. And then I put some numbers down for the in lieu fee. Those numbers are based on an older document that Efficiency Maine has that looks at the installation cost of EV chargers. And then some information that I've gotten from installers when we were looking at doing additional EV charging installation in Scarborough. So
I
Go ahead, Deb.
have a question, the commercial development part.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a conflict, and I think it's probably that we have a conflict. So the first sentence talks about is largely up to the business owners. And then the last two sentences talk about minimum requirements for installed and ready spaces.
yep, so I think that the intent there was, while, you know, I think it's because we're not requiring a lot of installation in EV readiness. It's really looking at the capability. And so that we can clarify that or have a discussion in terms of how we want that worded or presented.
In the table, there are like a lot of installed parking spaces. So 1% installed parking spaces in a lot of things. Which just feels like it conflicts with the largely up to business owners piece. And
And-
I'm just not convinced that, I mean, I keep coming back to places we know that Ace Hardware should be required.
Yep.
To have an EV parking space.
Mhm. So I don't feel like we had come to any kind of set decision in terms of the percentage of requirements in that table. So that's definitely something that we're going to want to work out over this meeting and next meeting ahead of the stakeholder discussion, so that we know exactly what we're asking for and what the developers are going to be responding to.
I just feel like lodging establishments and senior housing might be better suited to be in the commercial sector.
It might be, but this table is already existing in the zoning ordinance, so we're just modifying.
Also,
it.
it's trying to keep in that conformance with
Yeah.
parking spots and.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, I think, generally speaking, this hits it, but I'm concerned that we don't have any level threes in this, and I feel like there are cases, especially when you look toward the major artilleries, and it could be spelled out in such a fashion that, coming off the turnpike and you have a business there, potentially something large in the Downs, for example. Why shouldn't they put in a level 3 that's networked? They won't cost them anything to run the electricity. It's all networked. It becomes part of the grid in the nation's infrastructure. And because of location kind of thing.
Well, and I think that this is looking at the minimum requirement, and Deb has made a really good point that level 3 chargers are significantly more expensive than the level 2 chargers. So we're saying at a minimum level 2, but I mean, if it would make more sense in situations like that for someone to install a level 3, but again, that's gonna be 2 to 3 times the amount.
Nobody's gonna do that unless they're kind of pushed to do it.
I think my sense on the level 3s is that that's not a municipal decision as much as it is a coordinated regional decision.
Yeah, but how are we gonna coordinate something that's being, developed now at a local level, and now the developer has to bring in, all this other.
My sense as an EV driver has been that this is happening in a way that is sufficient. So like, I'm actually really pleased to see that they're being focused at grocery stores and at rest areas, because that gives me information about where to look for them. And so I think that we might, as a community outside of this, want to, in consultation with Greater Portland,
GP Pop, yeah.
Identify the right places for those kinds of level 3 chargers in Scarborough. And as a separate initiative, work to identify funding and like actively work to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not at all sure on this list what I would try to target for those level 3 chargers.
I don't know if it's even legal, but the thought occurs to me that we could, if it's going to be like a chain box store or something like that, like the Walmart. Walmart has level 3s in it.
Mhm.
And if another Walmart wanted to come in here and put another store down, just say hypothetically, there's nothing that tells them they have to do it.
Right.
But yet, part of why we have ordinances is to make sure that the benefit comes to the residents of Scarborough. And so I think there should be some mention of it and some requirement for these types of industries or businesses that come in and want to put up shop in Scarborough.
But I'm not sure it's the new ones that we would like. I would like to see us work with, say, Cabela's, because they're right.
Well, we're never going to do that with this ordinance because this is for new.
Right, that's gonna have to
But
be
this
a
is why I
separate
think it's
effort.
not an ordinance issue, because I feel like that it's gonna be like a one-off decision, and I don't wanna say every Walmart or Target needs to do it, because why not Lowe's? Like, I just can't quite figure out.
Yeah, I think Lowe's is included in that.
Right, but it would, to me, depend as much on where that's located. I mean, I would love to see us working with Hannaford's to get Hannaford's to install one of the Scarborough stores, since they've done that at several of their other stores.
We've got to be crystal clear that that's a different effort here.
Yeah, I think that we need
Yes,
to
and-
just focus at this
Right.
point on,
But my point is that I don't see a place in this ordinance that it would make sense to add that requirement. Because I think having 2 or 3 of them.
Well, let me just stop you right there. You're advocating for, maybe possibly working with the Scarborough Hannaford to get them to do a level 3. why not get it at the very beginning when a Hannaford decides to come into a community and say, okay, Hannaford, we welcome you. It's in the best interest of Scarborough to,
The Downs
residents
is
to have
already
it.
saying that, as part of their downtown, they're going to have a grocery store and some of these other, kind of larger retail spaces. So, I mean, I think it's trying to, we can put something, I would see it, level 3 only would be at retail sales and service, and we would have to have a certain threshold to indicate, what size, because like you said, the Ace Hardware probably doesn't make sense when people are just running in and coming back out, but
I think it could be tied to square footage of the building.
Yeah.
On the retail side, because you don't need a level 3 at a Hallmark store.
Right.
But at a Hannaford, you should have a level 3. So that's my only thing that, and maybe GP Cog could, maybe we should get GP Cog in here at our next meeting after we flush this through and say, and send it in advance and say, give it some thought and we'd love to hear your feedback.
because at this point, we haven't even come up with language. We're really just thinking conceptually about what we're looking at for requirements. So, like I said, these percentages haven't really changed in the commercial section of the table, haven't changed since this table was put together. So, it would be great to get some feedback and change around these numbers. And I think that,
Personally, I like these numbers. I have no problem with these numbers.
well, but then Deb is saying that she's like, well, we are saying that the decision to install chargers is a business decision. We're still requiring, some installation of chargers.
Yeah,
So,
and I agree with Deb on that too.
Well, we required certain plants to be planted in an area. I mean, what's the difference? We require a certain amount of buffer. What's the difference? And they wouldn't do it unless they were being told they had to do it, they're compliant. And there's a fee to pay if you don't want to do it.
Well, I think the difference is, in some cases, in some kinds of businesses, it doesn't make sense. It's a head scratcher. You have a business where people come in for 5 minutes and they leave for 5, people will say, it's a government overreach. It just doesn't make sense to put in, an EV charger that takes an hour to charge in a place where no one, spends more than 5 minutes. I think it's too restrictive. I think residences and places where people, stay overnight, that's a whole category. And that makes sense. But the types of businesses where people, fast food and.
So maybe
retail
this
where-
list, what you're saying is this list is too granular.
I kind of think, or should we be, is there like groupings of businesses that work together, like a business park or a strip mall, where you have 10
Well, keep in mind that the
businesses.
developer's coming to the site plan as the building, and the building is then gonna be subdivided amongst other people.
Do we
So
have
who's
that?
building that
Do-
parking?
Like a strip mall, there's nothing on the chart that says,
well, it's considered retail sales and services. I mean,
Okay.
But it's broken down here by financial insurance,
Yes.
personal services.
Yeah, and that's what I
That's
mean,
the too
maybe we're
granular.
too granular
That's-
in this.
that may be where we need to get to.
Go ahead, Deb.
And I feel like the total spaces is a significant overshoot, because I don't see a world in which we would need 50% of the spaces at a church ever to have EV chargers. Like, I just don't see that coming down the pike. I think we're moving towards cars that run further on a charge. I think the frequency of charging outside of the home would decrease. I think we need access for some things. But to even run conduit for 56% of the spaces in any of these places feels like, I think the word I would use is overkill. I mean, if you made me just throw a number out there, I don't see more than 20% utilized.
Well, I think, Deb, to be honest with you, we're living in today. I mean, what's the future? We can't predict, but for example, South Portland and Portland are going 100%. We're asking for half of that. And I don't know what the next 20 years, but if you build a brand new church today, it's gonna be around for 30 years.
Yes, it will be.
And I
Or a
don't
lot
think-
longer.
When you're at this level and this place in time where you're actually putting infrastructure in place, you're building to a new generation, a new world. And I think we don't want to be short-sighted, but yet we don't want to be, overarching and overkill. And I think 50% is not excessive.
You know, listening to this, I think all of you make really good points about a lot of issues. It just strikes me, if I were a business person and I was thinking, I think it would be, let me just sum up quickly. I think it would be interesting to hear what the business community says or a developer says about this. Maybe they don't find putting conduit in a parking lot, a new
Or a
parking
big deal.
lot, particularly onerous. And then they said, what's the big deal? And that would solve a lot of our issues when we talk about this. I also sent a little article around yesterday about General Motors donating EV chargers.
Yeah.
It would be just nice to have that capability. I mean, maybe I could score one for my little development,
I mean, that would be a developer going to GM and saying, listen, I'm gonna put in a new strip mall. I've got to put in some chargers. Can you
give me one that, so I'm just wondering what the business people would say, because if I was a business person, I would want to keep maximum possibility for future growth rather than restrict myself now. I'm not paying much. I'd like to have that capability. Maybe they wouldn't
I
find
think
it.
we gotta go in with something and put it out there for stakeholders to.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. In fact, as I was just gonna say, I mean, we're sort of in a ballpark mode here of, we don't know what the numbers are and whether it's 50 or 40 or whatever. But if we say 50 and you throw it out there and people come back and say, you are nuts because, and put it like that, we go, great. If they say, oh, okay, then
Yeah,
we say,
they
okay.
say,
When we find out then, because you're never gonna find out in this room.
Right.
yeah, because we're not in that business.
Yeah.
We don't know. We could guess.
Yeah, so, I mean, people are talking about I mean, you can easily take out the sentence that says it's driven by the business owners and just start with the second sentence. And then it just says, hey, this is what we think.
I guess the one thing we would find unacceptable is if a business owner says, I'm not going to put in anything at all.
Well, and that's when the in lieu fee comes up. So if
It's
they
when what
decide that
comes
they,
up?
we have the in lieu fee.
Yeah,
Oh,
So if
in
they don't
lieu.
want to do anything,
I thought that
then-
was a person, Ann Luffy. I was going, who's
yeah,
Ann
and
Luffy?
Luffy's gonna just drop the hammer.
I'm sorry, my ears are really shut.
No, the mask.
He's got his
I
mask
didn't
on
enunciate-
here.
I didn't enunciate well.
I like that.
So if they don't want to do anything, then if they don't want to meet the requirements, then
They
they,
either have to talk to Deb or Ann Luffy.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna go to the mat on 50% conduit ready.
I don't,
I want to talk about the handicap spaces and accessible spaces.
Yeah,
I would like for every accessible space to be conduit installed.
okay.
I think we need to talk to somebody in the disability community about what their expectations are. As we scroll through that, I don't see requiring every insurance company to have an EV installed accessible parking space. Today, like,
Well, again, none of this is today.
but it
All
would
of
be.
this is when somebody builds a new whatever, so.
There's a lot of infrastructure that's gonna be around that nobody's gonna touch for years and years and years and years.
And I
But
think it's critical to
There's
have.
so much, there's a set amount of land that has the potential to be built on.
Right,
What do we want to achieve with that? And what would serve the benefit of the community and the greater good? And that's what I'm looking at.
and I want conduit installed so that people can go back and install chargers without ripping up parking lots. I want the ability to install chargers for accessible parking spots. I want the ability to install chargers for actual like, stores and things. But I actually feel comfortable with that. Business owner gets to decide if the actual charger is there.
So for
Because I
the,
think that that's happening in a natural way.
so for, with the exception of retail sales and service, and we'll have to put in the minimum square footage that would have a requirement, do we want to take out the requirement for 1% installed?
And maybe I want to require some at these larger, like at a grocery store of a certain size, at a box store of a certain size. Like, I think it does make sense to require, like, I'm thinking about what's here, but like, to require it at something as big as Lowe's or Hannaford's or Cabela's. I think there should be, and I think they should always be installed in pairs.
I think generally speaking, you're going to find
Because-
most of that happening.
And it's not, it has not historically been the case, and there are lots of places where there's been one, and I pull up to it and it's used. And so requiring that they be installed in pairs at these big places, but I think we need to leave out the dentists and we need to leave out the personal services and stuff.
I
like
think we
that.
can
they
rope
need
in
to-
a bunch of things under smaller.
I think they need to be conduit installed. So that if an entity decides later that they want to install the chargers, they can.
Well,
Um,
and I think part of the reasoning for doing some of them at least EV ready is that because when they're building these things, they don't necessarily know who's moving in there. And so at least if some of them are easy to kind of plug and play.
Yep.
Um,
So 5% EV ready feels
Okay.
okay to me. But I think I would limit required installations to, and maybe it applies to like a large commercial space that gets cut up. And maybe it applies to a parking lot that serves several structures. I'm not sure how to construct the rule.
yeah, we'll
Um,
have to work with the planners on that for how to kind of get at that. And then also GPCog has put out some, their toolkit, which I shared with you all over the summer, has some good recommendations in there for that as well. So for what I'm hearing is that with the exception of retail sales and service, and we'll figure out how to get at kind of the minimum size that will trigger this, we're going to take out the requirements for all commercial with the exception of retail sales and service of a certain size. Is that sounding?
Is,
Or are you going to individual retail businesses, strip malls, large box stores over a number of square feet?
I think we'll get at that with the specific language and not necessarily be able to get to that within this table, since the table is really kind of just a summary. I'll have to talk, because this is an existing table and I've really just added columns to it for the EV requirements. I don't want to mess around with the table too
Yeah,
much.
I mean,
But we have certain standards in our ordinance for what is required based on the type of development that's happening. And so-
That's the number of parking spots.
And I think I still would like some sort of statement in there about recommendation, because the developers are gonna be reading the code. And I want them to read a recommendation to consider these installations. Even in some of these smaller places, because I think that,
I don't know if we can include recommendations within the ordinance.
okay,
Thou shalt do this.
Yes.
Yeah. okay.
if, this all comes from an existing document right now.
Yes.
Is there ever any squabbling about what's the difference between a high technology facility and a data processing facility? You
We
know,
don't
it just
normally
seems like
encounter
this stuff is
like that.
begging to be collapsed and simplified
Well, we've got
somehow.
water dependent driving ranges on here, so I think it's like,
You know, it's like so granular.
it is it's a little bizarre, yeah.
I mean,
I mean, nothing says that we can't make this a little more simplified by saying if you have an X large footprint on a parking spot and it is used for X purposes, the requirement shall be this. I don't think we don't have to be on this table.
We don't, this was just kind of our starting point.
It kind of gave us a framework of what is out there in the current ordinance and what are the requirements for parking spaces. But I think we can go based on the use and the size. Go ahead, Deb.
Okay, and so everything should be at least 50% conduit installed. 5%, what do you call it, EV ready, including all accessible spots that I want to be EV ready. And then level 2 chargers. And maybe what we do is incentivize level 3 chargers.
There's incentives available.
So,
But I still think we need some that say you gotta put the plug in now, today.
Yeah, and I think that it's the retail sales and services, because is where we're going to get at that.
Okay. And I think I'm okay that anything that goes in over a certain size needs to install a level 3.
so what does this chart look like in its current capacity? It's number of parking spaces?
Yeah, it's basically just the first 2 columns of this table.
And then where does it say number of parking spaces?
It's,
It's per the
it's right,
size,
it's
the
right
second
in
column.
here. It's
Okay,
the second
could
column.
we say if the number of parking spaces exceeds a certain number, like and choose a number? If on the existing chart that is out there already in the ordinance says more 20, that we say that's a candidate for EV, or if it's greater than 50. I don't know for each
But that's
of
all
these
gonna be
rows.
dependent on the size. Because
But
you
then-
need,
but
you
we
need so
wanna-
many parking spots.
Yeah.
You have to
Right,
have so
so
many
we
spots.
want to work with whatever is out there to make it simple.
Mhm.
Instead of a whole separate table that's, just, line by line granular like that, just tack on to the existing chart.
So if the required parking lot will be,
Pick a number, 20.
again, we need to
50.
figure out, like, what I always have to do is to drive to the places that I'm thinking of and get a sense of how many spots are, like, I did that over at one of the apartment buildings one day to feel like I was comfortable with what's here. And so what I would want to do is,
Could be a footnote. Could be an asterisk with a footnote, or 2 asterisks with a footnote. Instead of a separate chart, and it's tied to a number of parking spaces, which is it's not really the type of, there's 2. If it's a residence or overnight, that's one category. And then there's everything else. And
Yeah,
it's for the everything else, all this gets kind of confused. Then it's more, it's not the type of business, it's how many parking spaces that really
and
would
then that
indicate.
gets at this question of whether it's one parking lot for 6 different buildings, or
Yeah.
one parking lot for one big build, like, it sort of solves that problem.
yeah, no, I like that.
Okay, well, I can go back and rework the chart and send that back out to you. If we do want to plan to meet with developers in December, like we talked about at our last meeting, we need to start moving forward with some of this stuff so that we're in a good place and ready to get their feedback, so that we are all kind of cohesive and know what we are presenting to them. And
In front of the developers.
I mean, we don't want to have our discussions like this with them in the room. I mean, this is really the sausage making, and they don't need to see that. They need to, be presented with a lovely plate of sausage so that they can then pick and choose or give us.
They
their
like it,
feedback.
they'll eat it. If they don't, they'll fight it.
well, hopefully they only get 5 sausages on their plate,
Right.
rather than 300 sausages.
And so I think it just doesn't go in the table anymore. Except maybe for the residential piece where it feels like it might fit within the context of the
Okay.
table. But it's instead a narrative that describes the parking lot situation.
Yeah, if you have 10 spaces, you need this. If you have 20 spaces, you need this.
And so I think anything over 10 spaces, half of them would need to be conduit. I mean, I'm just throwing numbers out there.
Yeah, that's essentially what we have here.
I know, I
It
was
is,
thinking
it
if
is,
you've got
but I
10
don't think-
spaces, I mean, you may as well do 100% with conduit, because it's only 10 spaces.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
And
so something.
so
like-
now we're.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to the drawing board and,
I think we need to come up with something to present to the developers. I happen to think this table is a good foundation for that. Maybe it's a little too granular, and I accept that, but I think this is the way they would look at it. They're gonna say, okay, my building is this big, it does this function, therefore, the traffic coming into it is going to be this. And we're required to have this number of parking spots per the ordinance. And therefore, if I need 10 parking spots and 1% of them has to be EV ready, that's one spot.
Could you, I know everybody is crazy, I just, if this is if this is kind of like in the done, if this is sort of done in the can, can we run this could we just run this past somebody who was some like neutral, like, I don't know, like a Dan Bacon type or a Jay Chase or somebody?
Well, I think we're putting it together and letting a stakeholder group advise.
And just say, what do you think
You
about
always want to
this?
look at it as an advisory, we're collecting data.
Right,
We don't make any decisions at this advisory group or
Right.
meeting.
right.
It's to get your data, so then that we can take that data and other data, like from GPCOG and maybe other ordinances that are out there, and kind of mesh it all together, say, will this work for Scarborough?
I was just wondering if we had another set of eyes on this, what they would think about it, you know?
I mean, Jay has looked at this, and he felt really strongly that we need to get developer feedback, because I'm guessing there's gonna be pushback, because this is just an added cost in a time when costs are already going up. But it is a
But profits are
reality
going
of,
up too.
right,
Yeah, I'm not a developer, but I would be amazed that there would be, I guess there'll be pushback against anything, but you just think like you want to have this capability. Conduit is not that expensive. If you're building a lot, put it in, then you've got the ability to do it. It's so much cheaper to do it now than later. I mean, what are we talking about here? You know, you're gonna say, I'm not gonna put in conduit because I'm gonna save 50 cents. Figuratively.
well, so, we have about 15 minutes before y'all, many of you need to head out. So, I will take the information that you all have provided and work on, revising this and getting it back out, ahead of our next meeting, because, we had talked about meeting the first full week of December with with developers. So it looks like we'll have one more meeting before that happens.
But Thanksgiving is gonna fall into this,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if we could invite and I can't remember the name, but the transportation from GPCOG. And invite them so that we're hearing their data. And quite possibly that would help us finalize this, so that we could go to our next stakeholder group, the developers, and get their data based on what we've baked so far.
Jamie, can I ask you a question? If I'm glad I'm not in your shoes, because if somebody gave me that assignment right now to take this and do something with it, I wouldn't know what I was supposed to be doing. What do you plan to do with this?
So I am going to pull out most of the required installed, except for retail sales and service, and pull together a narrative based on the different uses.
So you're
and-
gonna try to collapse the uses into more simple categories?
Yeah,
And then put, based upon the way this is set up right now, but not use parking places
Yeah.
as the criteria?
or not use the percentage. We'll have like a threshold for, I see still working within a table, because that's kind of how my brain works, but have these change the percentages, have it like columns based on a certain parking lot size, and then have it split out into sub-columns for what is required to be capable, ready and installed, and then break it out that way. I'm not explaining it well, but I think it'll look out,
Okay, so you have an idea of what you're,
I think so.
you have a plan, in other
I
words.
kind of do.
All right, because I don't think I would, I'd be swimming
But
around.
this is why it's good this meeting is recorded, so I can go back and be like, what were they saying?
And just remember, this goes not only, this goes now to the ordinance committee, who's going to have and they may request some additional data from other sources before it goes, and then once it gets kind of baked there, it goes to the planning board for them to bake it a little bit and say, we offer these comments.
This is gonna be a hell of a pie.
It is, yeah, that's why I said it's sausage.
There's lots of
it's not even
ingredients
pie.
that are still left to go into the,
So I think that's why it might make some sense to try to keep it as simple as possible, but that's just me.
Well, let's see what Jamie does with it. And then I think if we're gonna require a level 3 in the largest of spaces, there needs to be a
A much
Definition.
higher.
much
in-
higher. And so that needs to say per level 2 installed
Yep.
parking space and then a much higher. one.
So up in definitions, could you add,
We'll add a definition for level 3, yeah.
and then the column that says ABS type,
Mhm.
would it make sense to say at a minimum, level 2? Because
Well, this isn't gonna feel like this anymore, I don't think.
I don't know, to your point, Rick, about introducing the idea of level 3 and into this somehow.
well, I think that
You wanna
gets
say
spelled out
minimum?
into certain, the change, the big change, the ones that are gonna have large parking lots. And I think that can be spelled out in the ordinance, just as that, box stores with, 50,000 square feet of parking area shall be required to have level 3. And, also some requirement for the level 2.
Mhm.
So is there, I don't know squat about these things, level 2, level 3. Is there a trade-off that you can make that says 2 level 2s or 1 level 3 or something like that, that is practical, makes sense to do or not? I have no idea.
I think at the end of the day, the ordinance will say there'll be something that is up to the planning board's discretion. So they could be working with the developer saying, okay, you want to do this, that maybe sounds reasonable, and you can go ahead and do that. So
Yeah,
maybe that'd be kind of the
I don't-
language that would work in there.
I'm assuming level 3 means that it charges faster.
Yeah.
So if you had to have 10 level 2s, but you could switch out 5 of those and put in 1 level 3 or something like
It's
that.
not
It'd be the same
exactly
thing.
trade-off though, because I mean, from an employee's perspective, having a level 3 there with somebody parked at it is no more useful to me than having a level 2 that I could pull up and park at for the day.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
But it has to do with the
That's why
cost
I don't-
too,
Yeah,
in terms of
yeah,
the customer's cost, because it's likely all of these are gonna be networked.
right.
And so if you pull up to a fast charger, it's like getting premium gas versus a level 2 when you're getting just regular unleaded.
Yeah.
So there is a difference in price.
And my other question is, is there any sense to doing this per N number of parking spots? So here are your requirements for, let's say, 20. So for every set of 20 parking spaces, you have that requirement. So if you had 40, you'd have double that
Well,
requirement.
that's the percentage.
Yeah, so, but I mean, so it has nothing to do with, if you had 20, you need these, but now we have to come up with a number for 100 parking spaces and 1,000 or whatever. You just say for every 20, you get this requirement. You figure out what that means in total. You can put them where you want them, but that's how many you need. I have no idea if that makes sense or not, but it's another way to make it simpler.
You have what you need?
Sure do.
I can see her playing the video several times.
Yeah, so just quickly, the in lieu fee, so I think that for a level 3 charger, we're probably looking, closer to $15,000.
Probably, yeah.
Per level 3, installed, so if people are good with those numbers, we'll leave them in there, or if you wanna do some looking and and see if that makes sense. I welcome you to check my work and, come back if we need to do any revision in there. So we have 10 minutes left. I do just want to share, I reached out to Karen Martin, to get SEDCO involved. She is really enthusiastic about this and has reached out to her board, to, have them participate. So there are board members who are developers and then just are interested in this kind of thing. So we're looking at a proposed date of Thursday, December 9th, in the morning from 8 to 9:30 for our stakeholder meeting. We had talked about the week of December 6th, so that puts us in the correct week, if that works for folks.
That's the December 9th.
December 9th,
What day of the week is
it's a
that?
Thursday,
Say the time again.
8 to 9:30.
December 9th.
I think we're gonna try to get the community room at the public safety building. So we can, a little bit more conducive to this type of thing, and we can do both a hybrid, so we can be in person and remote if folks want to participate remotely. And
That's it. Where's that gonna be?
I think it will be at the public safety building. But I need to get it.
It's nice room that can be used and it's got AV stuff.
I've never been there, so.
It's right next door.
I know, it's over there. I've never been
He's
to
been fingerprinted down. In the basement. He just hasn't been up on the level.
it.
And I will work with our planning folks to identify developers who should be invited. I already have an idea of some. Karen's already reached out to some of her board members and others who she thought would be good to have involved, and has gotten some interest from them as well. And then just real quick before people have to leave, I wanted to touch on our next meeting date. So it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I was going to recommend that we push that a week to December 1st, which will give us a week prior to the stakeholder meeting to kind of tie up loose ends, confirm an agenda.
Maybe get GP cog.
Yep, get GP cog.
I like it. I like it. I can do it. I don't know about other members.
So I'm sorry, you're saying 2 meetings, one on November 17th? And
No,
another one
No.
on December 2nd, or just no November meeting at all? No November.
our November meeting will be pushed to December
December 6th.
1st.
December 1st, that's a Wednesday.
That's
Correct.
right.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, yeah, Wednesday. yeah.
And then the 9th, the next week.
Yeah,
is
Following
the-
Thursday. Yep. I can do it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I should be able to do it.
And I'll send out calendar invites and stuff for all of this so that, to hopefully minimize confusion. I can't promise no confusion, but I'm hoping to minimize it.
Sounds good, Jamie. Good work.
So you're gonna have to polish this up before that.
Sure am. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get this out to you all sooner rather than later, and hopefully you can give me some feedback, like offline, so that, we can hopefully have everything in a good place for the December 1st meeting, so that, we can really focus on prepping for, the stakeholder meeting.
Well, my goal in all of this is to read it and erase as many miscellaneous points as possible.
I appreciate that.
Confuse the issue a little bit more.
Somebody has to do that. It's important.
Well, I think we can all do that.
Pretty good track record.
I know you can all do that.
So that's what we do best.
I think so. We're gonna throw more dust into the air.
I like to think our hearts are in the right spot.
I think we try anyway.
I'm sorry, I have to run.
I think 3 of you have to run.
Yes.
You're not riding your motorcycle today, I take it.
No, but I guess I won't be riding on the King of Angus Highway.
No, please
That's
don't.
snow. Imagine there's salt down there and sand on the road now.
So I think our official meeting is adjourn since we are losing our quorum.
Lewis is
Yeah.
more.
So, but that's fine. I mean, I think the
Did you
meeting,
have something else you wanted to add?
nope, those were the biggies that I wanted to get through.
If you all want a nice little tour, right down to the
Thank
downs if you get a chance. See what's going on in the downs.
Yes,
Go through the innovation district.
There's a
thank
lot-
you.
Wow, they're really throwing up the apartments and everything there, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm anxious to, I wish we could discuss the downtown, but I haven't finished reading that report either, but a lot of it, 279 pages with
It's
minutes and
long,
all.
it's
all the other
long.
stuff, but
It's
It had
long.
some good information in it.
I
Thank
know.
you, Jane.